Media fact checker. Magnitude 7.4 earthquake in Indonesia triggers tsunami warnings and localized damage. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A magnitude 7.4 earthquake struck the Maluku Sea region northeast of Indonesia at 9:48 AEDST, local time, with an epicenter 127 km west-northwest of Ternate, Indonesia, at a depth of 35 km. The U.S. Geological Survey (USGS) reported the quake, and Indonesia's meteorology agency, BMKG, confirmed tsunami waves of 0.3 m in West Halmahera and 0.2 m in Bitung. The U.S. tsunami warning system warned of possible tsunami waves along coasts of Indonesia, the Philippines, and Malaysia within 1,000 kilometers of the epicenter, with waves ranging from 0.3 m to 1 m in Indonesia. Japan's meteorological agency stated no tsunami damage was expected despite slight sea level changes, and Australia's Bureau of Meteorology confirmed no tsunami threat to its mainland. Indonesia sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a highly seismically active zone, and has experienced multiple deadly earthquakes and tsunamis in recent years, e.g., 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reported one confirmed fatality in Manado from falling rubble, but The Guardian did not mention any confirmed fatalities beyond the initial reports. ABC stated the quake was initially recorded at magnitude 7.4 by USGS with no mention of a 7.8 downgrade, while The Guardian explicitly noted the quake was initially recorded at 7.8 before being downgraded. ABC reported tsunami waves of 0.3 m in West Halmahera and 0.2 m in Bitung as confirmed by BMKG, but The Guardian did not specify these exact measurements. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian PM Albanese's housing tax reforms and energy crisis response amid Iran war tensions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese plans to wind back the capital gains tax discount and negative gearing to address housing affordability. Labour aims to build 1.2 million homes but is on track to miss this target. Albanese's government is rebuilding Australia's fuel stocks, which are below global standards, over 90% depleted. Opposition leader Angus Taylor criticised Albanese's televised address, calling it lacking in answers and leadership. Albanese adopted the coalition's policy to cut the fuel excise days prior to his speech. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian PM Albanese announces gambling advertising restrictions amid public pressure and criticism. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese announced new gambling advertising restrictions during a National Press Club address on Thursday, the 25th of April, 2024. The reforms include capping TV gambling ads to a maximum of 3 ads per hour between 6 a.m. and 8:30 p.m., mentioned in Guardian, news.com.au, ABC. Gambling ads will be banned on radio during school pickup and drop-off times, Guardian, news.com.au, ABC. Online gambling ads will be restricted to verified adult users, over 18, with opt-out options, Guardian, news.com.au, ABC. The government will block illegal offshore gaming sites and ban online Keno-type products, Guardian, news.com.au. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report that the Murphy Report was handed to the government in June 2023, but news.com.au states it was handed down in 2023 without specifying the exact month. The Guardian and ABC state the Murphy Report contained 31 recommendations, while news.com.au does not specify the number of recommendations. The Guardian and ABC report that the government will table a formal response to the Murphy Report on the 12th of May, 2024, but news.com.au does not mention this date. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Disappearance of 4-year-old Gus Lamont from South Australian Outback Station. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Gus Lamont was last seen on September 27, 2025, at Oak Park Station near Yunta, South Australia, around 5 p.m. playing on a mound of dirt. His grandmother reported him missing at approximately 8:30 p.m. after 3 hours of searching the property. The 60,000-hectare Oak Park Station was searched extensively by police, volunteers, drones, and Aboriginal trackers with no evidence found. In February 2026, police declared Gus's disappearance a major crime and ruled out theories that he wandered off or was abducted. Police identified a resident of Oak Park Station as a suspect in February 2026, though no arrests have been made. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states Josie Murray was arrested in February 2026 for a firearms offence unrelated to Gus's disappearance, but ABC does not mention this arrest. News Kamau reports police returned to the property in March 2026 due to rainfall, while ABC does not specify this timing for new searches. News Kamau claims other members of the family are no longer cooperating with police, but ABC only states Gus's parents are assisting and his grandparents are cooperating. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Neo-Nazi Joel Davis granted bail after threats against female MPs and social media hate speech. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Joel Davis, 30 or 31, is a prominent neo-Nazi figure charged with allegedly inciting others to rhetorically rape federal MP Allegra Spender in November 2024. Davis was granted bail at the fourth attempt after being denied 3 times previously, with his latest hearing held in the NSW Supreme Court on 28 March, 2024. Davis was arrested in November 2024 for allegedly posting on a neo-Nazi Telegram channel asking users to rhetorically rape MP Allegra Spender, who condemned a neo-Nazi rally outside NSW Parliament. Davis was kept in segregation at Long Bay Jail due to his political beliefs, with reports stating he had not been outside since December 2023 and showered only every 4 days. Davis allegedly made additional violent messages, including "We need a brutal rape of this C***T, he deserves rape and stupid bitch needs to be beaten" fr targeting MPs Kelly Sloan and Julie Inman Grant. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Davis was 30 years old, while The Guardian states he is 31. ABC states Davis was denied bail 3 times in the local court before the Supreme Court hearing, while The Guardian does not specify the number of local court denials. ABC reports Davis was removed from the NSN by Jack Eltis after the rhetorical rape comments, but The Guardian does not mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Sheffield Shield cricket final between Victoria and South Australia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Victoria finished top of the Sheffield Shield table with 7 wins from 10 matches. South Australia is the reigning champion attempting back-to-back titles in the Sheffield Shield final. The match is being played at Melbourne's Junction Oval. Victoria and South Australia are competing in the Sheffield Shield final. Day 3 of the match was delayed by rain. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's Matildas squad selection for FIFA Series friendlies in Kenya. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Matildas will play 2 friendlies in Kenya as part of the FIFA Series on April the 11th and 15th, 2024, against Malawi, ranked 153, and either Kenya, ranked 134, or India, ranked 67. Sam Kerr is named captain of the 22-player squad for the Kenya friendlies. Stalwarts Caitlin Ford, Steph Catley, Hayley Rosso, Alana Kennedy, and Mackenzie Arnold are included in the squad. Mary Fowler, Ellie Carpenter, Katrina Gorey, and Kyra Kunikros are notable omissions from the squad. The squad includes Letitia McKenna, Melbourne City, Jessica Nash, US Sassuolo, and Isabel Gomez, Central Coast Mariners, as debutantes or returnees. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian does not mention Claire Hunt's injury or surgery, while ABC explicitly states she is missing due to surgery on her right knee. The Guardian does not emphasize Mary Fowler's ACL recovery context as prominently as ABC does in its description of her omission. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. National Film and Sound Archives 2026 Sounds of Australia Collection highlights. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jack Colson's 1991 arrest speech. Gentlemen, this is democracy manifest. What is the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal was added to the NFSA's Sounds of Australia collection in 2026. The NFSA's Sounds of Australia collection includes 9 audio recordings selected annually by a panel of experts from public nominations, with items over 10 years old. The collection was launched in 2007 and now contains over 200 recordings, with the full archive dating back to 1896. Joe Dolce's 1981 song Shut Up Your Face was included in the 2026 Sounds of Australia collection, peaking at number 1 in Australia for 8 weeks and 11 other countries. The PB5 pedestrian crossing button sound was added to the collection, designed by Louis Chalice and sampled in Billie Eilish's 2019 song Bad Guy. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the NFSA's Sounds of Australia collection was launched in 2007 and now has over 200 recordings, while The Guardian does not specify the exact number of recordings but mentions over 300,000 audio items in total at the NFSA, with 1/3 at risk. ABC describes the NFSA's Sounds of Australia collection as including 9 pieces of audio added this year, but The Guardian does not explicitly state the number of new additions for 2026. ABC mentions the collection includes the jingle from the Reading Writing Hotline without specifying the year, while The Guardian clarifies it was developed in 2001. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia investigates Meta, TikTok, Google for under-16 social media ban violations. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube are under investigation by Australia's eSafety Commission for potential non-compliance with the under-16 social media ban, announced on or before February 2024. The eSafety Commission's compliance update, released February 2024, found platforms allow underage users to repeatedly attempt age assurance tests until they pass, per Guardian Australia, ABC, and News Corp Australia. Platforms are accused of failing to prevent banned users from creating new accounts after deactivation, as reported by Guardian Australia, ABC, and News Corp Australia. Poor systems for reporting underage users are cited by the eSafety Commission in investigations against the 5 platforms, per Guardian Australia and ABC. The maximum fine for systemic non-compliance under the ban is $49.5 million Australian dollars, $33.9 million US dollars, as stated by Guardian Australia, News Corp Australia, and ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Australia, Article 2, reports 31% of parents said their children still had social media accounts post-ban, while News Corp Australia, Article 4, does not provide a comparable parental survey figure. Guardian Australia, Article 1, states the ban forbids under-16s from having accounts with some of the biggest tech platforms, but News Corp Australia, Article 4, explicitly lists 10 platforms covered by the ban. Guardian Australia, Article 2, claims platforms allow users to repeatedly attempt age verification until they pass, but Meta's statement in The Guardian, Article 2, argues age verification is a challenge for the whole industry with natural error margins. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US directs embassies to counter foreign disinformation using X and military psychological ops. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The US State Department issued a cable signed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio on March 29, 2024, directing all American embassies and consulates worldwide to launch coordinated campaigns against foreign propaganda. The cable endorses Elon Musk's X, formerly Twitter, and its Community Notes feature as an innovative and crowdsourced tool to combat disinformation without compromising free speech or privacy. The US is targeting foreign disinformation campaigns from Iran, Russia, and China, which are described as coordinated efforts to undermine American interests abroad. The cable instructs embassies to work alongside the US military's Psychological Operations Unit, MISO, to counter disinformation. The European Union fined X €120 million, $137.5 million, under the Digital Services Act for deceptive practices, with further investigations ongoing. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two Guardian articles provided. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Legal battle over suppression of Bondi terrorists' family identities. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Naved Akram, 24, is charged with 59 offences including 15 counts of murder, 40 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of committing a terrorist act related to the Bondi beach shooting on December 14, 2023. Akram's father, Sajid Akram, 50, was shot dead by police at the scene of the Bondi attack during a Hanukkah festival. A Sydney court, local court Judge Hugh Donnelly, dismissed a 40-year suppression order request for Akram's mother, brother, and sister's identities, addresses, and workplaces on March 21, 2024. Akram's license, including his address, Bonnyrigg, Sydney, was posted on social media shortly after the December 14 shooting, making suppression ineffective. Media outlets including ABC, Guardian Australia, 9, and News Corp Australia opposed the suppression order, arguing the information was already public. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and Guardian both confirm Akram's address was posted on social media via his driver's license, but news.com.au does not explicitly state the exact method of the leak, only that it was posted online. ABC and Guardian both report the suppression order was dismissed due to the information being already public, but news.com.au does not mention the driver's license leak as prominently in its summary. ABC and Guardian both state Akram's mother's name was in the public domain due to her Sydney Morning Herald interview, but news.com.au does not reference this interview specifically. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Northern Territory records multiple deaths in custody within a week. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 19-year-old man died from stab wounds in Katherine on Sunday evening after being found in a car by police, with 2 officers performing first aid before he was taken to a temporary field hospital, Newscomau, ABC, Guardian. The Katherine stabbing victim's death is being investigated as a death in custody because he was in police care before dying, Newscomau, ABC. A 26-year-old man died at Darwin Correctional Centre on Saturday morning after being found unresponsive in his cell. Medical assistance was provided but he was declared deceased, Guardian, ABC, Newscomau. A 25-year-old man died in police custody on Tuesday after experiencing laboured breathing in the back of a police vehicle in Darwin's northern suburbs, Guardian, ABC, Newscomau. The 25-year-old man was arrested following reports of an assault at Taiwi Gardens Retirement Village, Guardian, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau states the 19-year-old Katherine victim died shortly after being in the care of police, while Guardian and ABC do not specify the exact timing of his death in custody. Newscomau mentions the 25-year-old man's death occurred in Darwin's northern suburbs without specifying the exact location, while Guardian and ABC both reference Tui Gardens retirement village as the arrest location. Guardian states the 25-year-old man was arrested following reports of an assault at a retirement village, but does not specify the name of the village, while ABC explicitly names Tui Gardens retirement village. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. TT Line introduces 15% fuel surcharge on Spirit of Tasmania ferry tickets due to rising fuel costs. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. TT Line announced a 15% fuel surcharge on new Spirit of Tasmania ferry tickets effective immediately, both sources. Fuel prices for TT Line increased by 80%, both sources, attributed to Ken Konofsky. The surcharge will not apply to existing ticket holders, both sources. TT Line projects $50 million in losses due to fuel cost increases, both sources, attributed to Ken Konofsky. The surcharge is described as temporary and will be reviewed regularly, both sources. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the surcharge could remain even after fuel prices drop to distribute costs, while ABC does not explicitly state this as a certainty but mentions it may remain at some level. News Kamau provides specific dollar amounts for surcharge impacts, e.g., $228 for family of 4 with caravan, but ABC only mentions approximate figures, e.g., about $107 for 2 adults with car. News Kamau attributes the unsustainable fuel cost description directly to Ken Konofsky, while ABC does not include this exact phrasing in quotes. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian political reaction to US-Iran war and economic fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Andrew Hastie, Liberal MP, criticized US President Donald Trump's huge miscalculation in the Iran war as of early March 2024. Iran has blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, impacting global fuel supply chains and Australian energy exports. Andrew Hastie stated Australia is dependent on the export of fuel in and out of the Middle East due to its location. The Australian government announced it would underwrite additional fuel cargo deliveries to address supply shortages, March 2024. Andrew Hastie served as a Special Forces veteran and fought in the Middle East alongside US forces. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reported the government was in discussions with suppliers to source additional fuel, while News Kamau did not mention this specific detail. ABC stated Employment Minister Amanda Rishworth said, "We are not at the stage yet where we are suggesting people should work from home because of the fuel shortages," but News Kamau did not reference this. ABC mentioned Hastie may be open to the levy on gas profits, while News Kamau did not discuss this potential policy shift. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Fuel crisis impacts Australian tourism and travel plans during Easter 2025. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tourism Research Australia reported overnight visitor spending fell $2.3 billion nationally in the year to December 2025, with Victoria, $1.2 billion, NSW, $410 million, and Queensland, $379 million, hardest hit. Fuel prices are driven by the Middle East conflict, causing surges across Australia. Southern Queensland tourism operators report cancellations due to fuel concerns, including a 60% drop in bookings for Noosa quad bike tours, Charles Murray. The federal government confirmed fuel shortages at hundreds of service stations nationwide. Jetstar announced it will cut about 12% of Trans-Tasman flights from May 2025 due to cost pressures. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states fuel shortages are widespread with hundreds of impacted service stations, while the second ABC article's Dr. Ian Jeffries claims fuel stockouts are highly unlikely. Article 1 reports Victoria's $1.2 billion spending drop as the hardest hit state, but the second article focuses on southern Queensland's tourism sector without quantifying Victoria's impact. Article 1 mentions Qantas increasing Australia-Europe flights, while the second article does not discuss Qantas capacity changes. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US DHS funding standoff and partial shutdown over immigration enforcement funding. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The US Senate passed a funding package for DHS, excluding ICE and parts of CBP, on March 28, approved by voice vote in a rare overnight session. The partial DHS shutdown began on February 13, 2025, after Democrats blocked funding for ICE and Border Patrol unless reforms were implemented. TSA employees have worked without pay since mid-February, leading to increased absenteeism and airport delays, with wait times peaking in recent weeks. Donald Trump signed an executive order on March 27 instructing DHS to pay TSA agents immediately, addressing the pay delay emergency. The House of Representatives rejected the Senate's bipartisan DHS funding deal on March 29, passing its own bill funding DHS fully for 8 weeks, 213 to 203 vote. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the Senate's funding bill was approved by the Senate unanimously last week, while Article 2 does not mention this and only reports a voice vote on March 28. Article 2 claims Trump tweeted he would pay 50,000 airport security workers on March 27, but Article 1 does not mention this specific number or timing for Trump's executive order. Article 3 reports Trump's executive order to pay TSA agents was framed as a response to Democrat chaos at the airports, while Article 4 does not attribute this framing to Trump's statement. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Fair Work Commission abolishes junior pay rates for 18 to 20-year-olds in Australia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Fair Work Commission scrapped discounted pay rates for young adult workers aged 18 to 20 in retail, fast food, and pharmacy sectors. Around 500,000 workers will be affected by the wage increase, including those at Coles, Woolworths, McDonald's, and Hungry Jack's. Junior pay rates previously paid 18-year-olds 70% of the adult rate, 19-year-olds 80%, and 20-year-olds 90% of the award rate. The changes apply to the General Retail Industry Award, Fast Food Industry Award, and Pharmacy Industry Award. The wage adjustments will be phased in over 4 years, with the first changes starting in December 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. SBS does not mention the 500,000 worker estimate or the 4-year phase-in period, which are both referenced in Guardian and ABC. Guardian and ABC both state the first wage adjustments begin in December, but SBS does not specify a timeline. ABC and Guardian both mention the comparison to equal pay for women, while SBS omits this historical analogy entirely. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Review of JW Marriott Khao Lak Resort and Spa in Thailand by 2 sources. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The resort is named JW Marriott Khao Lak Resort and Spa. It has 424 rooms and villas in total, including 127 added after a major redevelopment. The resort is located at 4112 Smoo 3 Kuk Kark, Takua Pa District, Phang Ngo, Thailand, 82220. Deluxe rooms start at $253 per night. The resort features 6 distinct accommodation wings connected by extensive waterways. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the 2 sources. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian study links vaping to lung and oral cancer risk. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A new review led by researchers from the University of New South Wales, UNSW, found nicotine-containing vapes are likely to cause lung and oral cancers, based on evidence from 2017 to 2025. The review analysed mouse studies, human biomarker studies, oxidative stress, epigenetic changes, inflammation, and case reports, including a 19-year-old man with oral cancer after extensive vaping. Australia's federal government in 2024 restricted vape sales to pharmacies for smoking cessation or nicotine dependence management only. Black market vapes in Australia often contain nicotine despite labels claiming otherwise, according to Alexander Larcombe, Curtin University. The review did not establish a definitive epidemiological link between vaping and cancer but identified biological markers, DNA damage, inflammation, linked to cancer risk. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reported Dr. Stewart said there is still no epidemiological link between vaping and cancer, while The Guardian framed the review as finding likely cancer risk without definitive numbers. The Guardian noted Professor Duffy called overinterpreting vaping harm as an overinterpretation, but ABC did not include this direct quote or nuance from Duffy. ABC emphasized Dr. Stewart's caution that definite proof will take decades, whereas The Guardian focused on the urgency for regulators to act now despite incomplete data. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's Easter weather forecast and potential cyclone threat next week. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A tropical low, labelled 37U, between Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands is expected to deepen and strengthen over the weekend, with a high chance of becoming a cyclone by Sunday in the Coral Sea. The potential cyclone could impact the Australian coast mid-next week, with possible landfall anywhere from Rockhampton to Cape York Peninsula, per both sources. Easter weekend weather will be mostly calm and settled for most of Australia, with no major weather events like heatwaves, floods, or cyclones expected during the long weekend. Sydney is forecast to see showers from Good Friday onward, with maximums in the low to mid-20s Celsius and rain most days except Monday. Brisbane will experience warmer temperatures, high 20s Celsius, and a chance of rain for the first 3 days of Easter, with windy conditions along the Queensland coast. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian says showers in Sydney will occur from the get-go, Good Friday onward, while ABC states Sydney will start mostly sunny at 27°C on Good Friday before turning showery later in the day. The Guardian mentions pretty windy conditions along the Queensland coast with marine wind warnings, but ABC does not explicitly mention wind warnings, only onshore winds bringing showers. The Guardian states thunderstorms in Perth are possible from Good Friday, while ABC says Perth's chance of precipitation peaks at 30% on Saturday and Sunday but does not mention thunderstorms explicitly. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Climate change threatens extinction of superb fairy-wren within 30 to 40 years. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Researchers predict the superb fairy-wren species could go extinct between 2059 and 2062 due to climate change impacts, under intermediate and very high greenhouse gas emission scenarios. The superb fairy-wren population at the Australian National Botanic Gardens in Canberra experienced a 50% mortality rate in 1 year, 2024, the largest loss recorded in a single 12-month period. Another group of superb fairy-wrens, 8 kilometres away in Mount Ainslie foothills, recorded a 70% mortality rate over the winter of 2025. The study was published in the journal Nature and involved researchers from the Australian National University and James Cook University. The superb fairy-wren was named Australia's favourite bird in contests conducted by The Guardian in 2013 and 2021. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the study was published after a 50% mortality rate in 2024, while The Guardian does not specify the year of the 50% mortality rate but links it to last year, implying 2025. ABC mentions the study was based on data from the Australian National Botanic Gardens in Canberra, while The Guardian does not explicitly state this location but refers to Canberra's Botanic Gardens. ABC reports the pied currawong population decline as a potential positive for fairy-wrens, while The Guardian does not mention this predator decline or its implications. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. F1 safety crisis after Oliver Bearman's high-speed crash at Japanese GP due to closing speed differentials. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Oliver Bearman crashed at the Japanese Grand Prix with a 50G impact after evading Franco Colapinto's Alpine at Suzuka's Spoon Curve, turn 13. Bearman's Haas was traveling at 190 miles per hour, 307 kilometers per hour when he hit the barriers, suffering only bruising despite extensive car damage. The closing speed between Bearman's Haas and Colapinto's Alpine was approximately 50 kilometers per hour, 31 miles per hour due to Bearman using boost mode while Colapinto was recovering energy. Kimi Antonelli won the Japanese Grand Prix, becoming the youngest driver to lead the F1 Drivers' Championship after starting 6th. The FIA confirmed it will review regulations before the Miami GP, next race in 5 weeks, to address closing speed issues. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Bearman's impact was measured at 50G, while The Guardian, Article 3, states his speed was 307 km per hour, 191 miles per hour, but does not specify G-force. Only ABC provides the 50G figure. The Guardian, Article 1, quotes Haas principal Ayo Komatsu saying Bearman had a huge closing speed and scary moment, but ABC does not include this direct quote, only paraphrases it. ABC mentions Bearman's crash may prompt F1 bosses to consider closing speeds as a topic, while The Guardian, Article 1, frames it as an immediate urgent action demand from drivers and teams. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Fungal outbreak at Sydney Hospital linked to construction-related mould exposure. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Royal Prince Alfred Hospital's transplant unit, Ward 9E, experienced a fungal outbreak in late 2025 linked to aspergillosis mould. 6 transplant patients were diagnosed with the fungal infection, with 2 deaths directly attributed to the infection. A balcony near construction work was identified as the probable source of the outbreak by NSW Health's report. Construction on the hospital's $900 million redevelopment was occurring adjacent to the balcony during the outbreak. The infection did not spread person to person but became airborne during construction activities. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the 4th seriously ill patient remains in intensive care 4 months after diagnosis, while Article 2 says this patient has been in ICU for 3 months. Article 2 specifies the 3rd patient died from multi-organ failure due to sepsis associated with a skin condition, but Article 1 does not mention this distinction. Article 2 notes the report found the balcony posed the greatest risk but also states the investigation team was unable to determine a single conclusive cause, while Article 1 omits this uncertainty. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. South Australia wins back-to-back Sheffield Shield titles by defeating Victoria in the final. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. South Australia won the Sheffield Shield final against Victoria at Melbourne's Junction Oval. The match was decided on day 5 with South Australia winning by 56 runs. Victoria was all out for 139 runs in their second innings after needing 196 to win. South Australia was 102-5 when the match resumed on day 5. Liam Scott took 3 wickets for South Australia, 3-32, in the final. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC Article 1 states South Australia needed 5 wickets and Victoria 94 runs away from the win at the start of day 5, while The Guardian states Victoria needed 196 runs to win. The Guardian mentions Victoria lost their last 5 wickets for 27 runs, while ABC Article 1 does not specify the number of wickets lost but states Victoria lost their last 5 wickets. The Guardian implies controversy over the Peake dismissal due to a potential no-ball, while ABC Article 1 does not mention any controversy or no-ball allegations. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Melbourne Storm forward Tui Kamikamica hospitalised after suspected stroke. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tui Kamikamica suffered a suspected stroke on Monday morning during a medical episode. Kamikamica was discharged from Royal Melbourne Hospital to commence inpatient rehabilitation, Article 1, and is currently in hospital receiving treatment, Articles 2 and 3. Kamikamica played 25 minutes for Melbourne Storm in their 28-24 loss to North Queensland Cowboys in Townsville on Saturday, Articles 1 and 2. Kamikamica has made 142 appearances for Melbourne Storm since his NRL debut in 2017. Kamikamica captains Fiji at the international level and was part of the Storm's 2023 Grand Final side. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Kamikamica has been discharged from hospital to commence inpatient rehabilitation, while Articles 2 and 3 state he is still in hospital receiving treatment. Article 1 mentions Kamikamica played against North Queensland Cowboys in Townsville, while Article 2 states he played against the Cowboys in Townsville but does not specify the opponent's name in the headline or body text, though the opponent is implied to be the same. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump's escalating tensions with NATO allies over Iran war and Australia's response under Albanese. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump threatened to withdraw the US from NATO after allies refused to support his war with Iran. Australia and the UK denied the US military access to their airspace and refused to commit naval assets to the conflict. Trump accused non-participating countries to go get your own oil by force from the Gulf. Anthony Albanese, Australian PM, avoided direct criticism of Trump's war conduct in a national address. Keir Starmer, UK PM, opposed the war but granted some of Trump's demands despite opposition. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 claims Trump's war with Iran has secured the incumbent Iranian regime despite the assassination of its original leaders, while Article 2 does not mention regime change or assassination. Article 1 describes Trump's war as illegal and a global catastrophe with no articulated ends, while Article 2 frames it as a dangerous standoff but does not explicitly call it illegal. Article 1 suggests Albanese's address steered well clear of even vaguely criticizing Trump and did not reassure Australians, while Article 2 claims Albanese quite rightly brushed off Trump's criticism and is exercising agency. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Former AFL player Nick Stevens convicted of fraud in pool installation scheme. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nick Stevens was found guilty on 12 counts of obtaining a financial advantage by deception and one charge of using a false document in the County Court of Victoria, May 2024. Stevens pleaded not guilty to all 14 fraud-related charges in 2019, with the trial concluding in May 2024 after multiple delays. 6 families in Mildura, Victoria, were defrauded out of a total of $170,000 to $171,000 for pools they never received or had illegally installed. Stevens was remanded in custody until his plea hearing on May 21, 2024, with Judge Fiona Todd denying bail extensions. Prosecutor Tony Stokes alleged Stevens knew he lacked building permits and never intended to install legally compliant pools, leaving victims with unfinished pools or holes in their yards. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Judge Todd knocked back bail, while Newscamau says she was unconvinced Stevens' bail should be extended, slightly different phrasing but implies similar denial. Newscomer reports Stevens showed little reaction to verdicts, but ABC does not mention his emotional response. ABC cites a victim's $30,000 payment as more than $30,000, while Newscomer does not specify the exact amount beyond the $171,000 total. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-Iran conflict escalation with Trump's threats and regional fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump threatened to obliterate Iran's electric generating plants, oil wells, Karg Island, and possibly all desalinization plants if a ceasefire deal is not reached by April 6, Guardian, Newscomer ABC. Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghai stated US peace proposals were excessive, unrealistic, and irrational, Guardian, ABC. Iran has denied direct negotiations with the US, only engaging through intermediaries, Guardian, ABC. Thousands of US troops, including 2,500 Marines, have arrived in the Middle East, with additional forces building capacity for potential future operations, Guardian, ABC. Oil prices are on track for a record monthly rise, with Brent crude up 54% since March, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Trump's deadline for a ceasefire is April 6, but Newscomer does not specify a deadline beyond shortly or until the 6th of April, vague phrasing. The Guardian reports Iran's parliament is considering exiting the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but ABC does not mention this. The Guardian states Spain closed its airspace to US planes, while ABC does not mention this development. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Tottenham Hotspur fires interim manager Igor Tudor amid relegation crisis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tottenham Hotspur fired interim manager Igor Tudor after 7 matches and 44 days in charge, with a mutual agreement on his departure announced on March 25, AEST. Tudor's final match in charge was a 3-0 home loss to Nottingham Forest on March 22, leaving Spurs 1 point above relegation with 7 games remaining. Tottenham's 50-year Premier League streak is at risk, with the club currently 1 place and 1 point above the relegation zone. Tudor was hired on February 14 to replace Thomas Frank, with a contract until the end of the season. Tottenham lost 5 of Tudor's 7 league matches, including 4 straight losses at the start of his tenure. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC mentions former Spurs manager Harry Redknapp expressed interest in the role before Tudor's departure, but The Guardian does not mention Redknapp's interest. ABC states Tudor's first match was a 4-1 loss to Arsenal, while The Guardian does not specify the score of Tudor's first match but confirms it was a loss. ABC highlights that Tudor's father's death occurred after the Nottingham Forest match, but The Guardian does not explicitly state the timing of the death relative to the match. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian aid worker Zomi Frankcom's death in Israeli drone strike and ongoing investigation demands. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Zomi Frankcom, 43, and 6 World Central Kitchen colleagues were killed in an Israeli drone strike on their humanitarian convoy in Gaza on April 1, 2024. Israel's IDF dismissed 2 officers and reprimanded 3 others following an internal investigation into the strike. Former Australian Defence Force Chief Mark Binskin's 2024 report found a significant breakdown in situational awareness and serious failures in IDF procedures, concluding the strike was not knowingly or deliberately directed against the convoy. Mal Frankcom, Zomi's brother, has repeatedly demanded the release of the unedited drone strike audio footage for transparency. Israel's ambassador to Australia, Hillel Newman, stated the investigation into the strike is ongoing and has not been shelved or concluded. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report Israel's ambassador Hillel Newman denied the investigation was shelved, but Mal Frankcom stated the family has been told the case is still under review while other high-profile cases have been closed. The Guardian claims Israel's ambassador dismissed claims of over 200 journalists killed in Gaza as disinformation, while the ABC and News.com.au do not address this specific claim. The Guardian and ABC both cite Mark Binskin's report as concluding the strike was not intentional, but The Guardian notes Binskin was denied access to the drone audio footage despite claiming full access to other materials. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and News.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Arsenal's 3-1 WSL win over Tottenham featuring Alessia Russo's hat-trick and tactical analysis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Arsenal defeated Tottenham 3-1 in the Women's Super League at the Emirates Stadium on Saturday. Alessia Russo scored a hat-trick in the first 27 minutes for Arsenal, including goals at 4 foot, 11, and 19, or 22 in Article 1. Tottenham conceded 2 goals in the opening 10 minutes, including a Frida Lenhardsen-Marnum own goal at 29 foot, Article 1, or 22, Article 2. Arsenal's 25th and 26th goal contributions came from Russo in 31 games, placing her 4th in WSL scoring charts. Renee Sledgers praised Russo as a complete footballer and one of the best finishers she's seen. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Russo's hat-trick took 22 minutes, while Article 2 states it took 27 minutes, with goals at 4, 11, and 19. Article 1 reports Marnum's own goal at 29 minutes, but Article 2 reports it at 22 minutes. Article 1 lists Russo's hat-trick goals as a header from McCabe's corner, a low drive past Cop, and a penalty area finish, while Article 2 describes the 11 goal as a classy finish after walking past Cop. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Manly Sea Eagles sack Anthony Seibold after 0-3 start, Kieran Foran named interim coach. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Seibold was sacked as Manly Sea Eagles head coach on the 19th of April, 2026 after a 0-3 start to the season, including a 33-16 loss to the Sydney Roosters on the 18th of April, 2026. Kieran Foran, a premiership-winning Manly player and former assistant coach, was appointed as the club's interim head coach following Seibold's dismissal. Foran's first game as head coach will be against the Brisbane Dolphins on the 25th of April, 2026 at Redcliffe Stadium. Seibold had a 49% win rate, 37 wins, 38 losses, 2 draws, in 77 games at Manly since 2023, including a 48% win rate, 37 wins, 39 losses, in 76 games as reported by multiple sources. Manly's 2026 season began with 3 straight home losses: Sydney Roosters, 33-16, Newcastle Knights, and Canberra Raiders. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC Article 1 states Foran's first press conference included a joke about overdosing on chocolate, but SMH Article 3 does not mention this detail. SMH Article 4 claims Seibold was a dead man walking from December 2025 due to Jason King's leadership, while ABC Article 2 does not reference this timeline or internal club sentiment. ABC Article 2 lists Brad Arthur, Matt Bolin, and Michael Ennis as frontrunners for the permanent role, but SMH Article 3 only mentions Arthur and Bolin explicitly. This story was covered by ABC News and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 20-year-old man accused of plotting WA terror attacks faces bail hearing. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jason Joseph Michaels, 20, is accused of plotting a terrorist attack targeting Parliament House, police headquarters, and mosques in Perth, WA, following a raid on his parents' Bindoon home in February 2024. Police seized a written manifesto, dozens of rounds of ammunition, 900+, guns, and knives during the raid at the Bindoon home, located 75 kilometers northeast of Perth. Michaels allegedly wrote in his diary that his planned attack would be worse than the Bondi beach shootings, referencing the December 2023 attack with the line, "What I want to do to both these groups pales in comparison to today." Michaels appeared via video link from Casuarina prison during his bail hearing on March 2024, where he was remanded in custody after Magistrate Belinda Coleman refused bail. Michaels' lawyer, Christian Porter, argued his client was depressed, isolated, and engaged in escapism rather than a genuine plot, describing the diary as big talk and fantasy. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states Michaels was remanded in custody after a February 2024 raid, while ABC does not specify the exact month of the raid but implies it was in early 2024 without contradicting the timeline. The Guardian describes Michaels as allegedly planning to buy a 3D printer to make a gun and got a job where he could access bomb-making materials, but News Kamau and ABC do not mention the job aspect explicitly. ABC mentions Michaels may have autism spectrum disorder as a potential mitigating factor, which is not referenced in News Kamau or The Guardian. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US Supreme Court hearing on Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump attended oral arguments at the US Supreme Court on February 21, 2024, making him the first sitting president to do so. The Supreme Court heard arguments over whether Trump's executive order could strip birthright citizenship from children born in the US to undocumented immigrants or temporary residents. The 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause was affirmed by the Supreme Court in United States v. Wong Kim Ark 1898, and has been interpreted as granting birthright citizenship broadly for over 125 years. The Trump administration argues the phrase "subject to the jurisdiction thereof" in the 14th Amendment excludes children of undocumented immigrants or those with temporary status. The Migration Policy Institute estimated Trump's order would increase the unauthorized immigrant population by 2.7 million by 2045 and 5.4 million by 2075, based on 255,000 affected births annually. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Trump left the courtroom after the government's arguments concluded, while Article 2 does not specify his departure time but implies he remained for the full session. Article 1 emphasizes that a majority of justices remained skeptical of Trump's efforts, while Article 2 frames it as unclear how many justices might side with Trump without a definitive majority. Article 1 does not mention Trump's public statements about other countries selling citizenships or his stupid court remark, which Article 2 includes. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump criticizes Australia and NATO allies over Iran conflict support. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump called Australia's response to the US-Israel war on Iran not great and said he was surprised by Australia's lack of involvement during a White House press conference on 2024-03XX, exact date unspecified. Trump stated that Australia, alongside NATO countries like the UK, did not provide military support for securing the Strait of Hormuz during the Iran conflict, with the UK offering aircraft carriers only after the war had begun. Australia's Defence Minister Richard Marles confirmed Australia had not rejected any US requests but emphasised decisions were made based on national interest and that Australia had provided defensive support for the UAE, surveillance aircraft and missiles. Trump described the Iran conflict as a little league war and implied allies would not support the US in a larger conflict, stating "We spend trillions protecting Europe but they were not there for the US." Trump previously criticized Australia on social media for refusing to assist in securing the Strait of Hormuz and claimed the US does not need the help of anyone in the war effort. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report Trump's criticism of Australia's response to securing the Strait of Hormuz, but only ABC includes Trump's claim that Iran offered 8 big boats of oil as a gesture of goodwill, which Iran has not confirmed. The Guardian and ABC both cite Trump's criticism of Australia's lack of support, but only ABC explicitly states Trump called Iran's nuclear ambitions a chance to abandon permanently and framed the US proposal as a worst nightmare for Iran if rejected, while The Guardian focuses solely on military support. The Guardian and ABC report Trump's criticism of the UK's delayed aircraft carrier offer, but only ABC includes Trump's claim that the UK's carriers were toys and his direct response, "Oh, that's wonderful, thank you very much. Don't bother." This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. North Korea's cyber espionage and fraud targeting Australian firms via fake IT jobs. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. North Korea's regime is using an army of thousands of undercover operatives posing as remote IT workers to infiltrate Western companies, with a focus on Australia and the US. The UN estimates North Korea's annual revenue from this operation is approximately $800 million. ASIO, Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, has identified undercover North Korean operatives targeting Australian firms to funnel salaries back to Pyongyang. Major Australian banks, including NAB, have been infiltrated by North Korean agents, with at least one agent discovered and subsequently sacked. The Australian Federal Police's cyber threat teams are assessing intelligence that North Korean agents are already on shore, including a Melbourne University alumnus suspected of being a regime intermediary. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources as they contain identical text and reporting. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Israeli death penalty law for Palestinians sparks UN and international condemnation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Israeli Knesset passed a new death penalty bill on March 11, 2024, making execution the default sentence for Palestinians in the West Bank convicted of deadly terrorism attacks by military courts. UN Rights Chief Volker Turk called the law patently inconsistent with Israel's international law obligations and warned its application in occupied Palestinian territory would constitute a war crime. The bill applies only to Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, while Israeli civilians convicted of similar crimes face either death or life imprisonment in civilian courts. Israel has only applied the death penalty twice since its founding, in 1948, military captain for treason, and in 1962, Adolf Eichmann for Nazi crimes. The law requires executions to be carried out within 90 days of sentencing, with detainees held in isolated facilities and legal consultations via video link only. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the Knesset passed the bill late on Monday, local time, without specifying the exact date, while The Guardian explicitly names March 11, 2024. ABC does not mention the hanging method of execution, while The Guardian explicitly states executions would be carried out by hanging. ABC highlights Spain's ambassador withdrawal as permanent on March 11, but The Guardian does not mention the timing or permanence of the withdrawal. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Daly Cherry-Evans return to Manly-Warringah Sea Eagles as a rooster marks emotional rivalry and club struggles. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Daly Cherry-Evans played his first game for the Roosters against his former club Manly-Warringah Sea Eagles on 2026 season opener. Manly lost to the Roosters 33-16 in the match at Brookvale Oval. Cherry-Evans made 352 appearances for Manly over 15 years before leaving for the Roosters. The game took place despite severe weather conditions, including power cuts and heavy rain before kickoff. Manly's forward pack struggled with only Jake Trbojevic, 8 runs for 70m in 3 games, and Taniela Paseka contributing significantly. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two articles. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government underwrites fuel imports amid Middle East tensions and shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced new fuel security powers on Saturday to underwrite additional fuel cargo imports due to Middle East tensions. The government will amend the Export Finance and Insurance Corporation Act to grant new powers for fuel security, with legislation introduced on Monday. Shortages of unleaded petrol and diesel are reported at hundreds of service stations, particularly in New South Wales and Queensland. The government urges motorists to avoid panic buying, citing it as a key factor in shortages. Australia has more than a month's worth of fuel reserves, including petrol and jet fuel, according to Energy Minister Chris Bowen. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the government will underwrite fuel, fertilizer, and other essentials, unspecified, while The Guardian explicitly names fertilizer but does not mention other essentials. ABC does not mention regional Australia as a specific focus for shortages, while The Guardian emphasises shortages are particularly severe in regional Australia. ABC quotes PM Albanese saying the government's focus is on supply and does not rule out future excise cuts, while The Guardian does not mention excise cuts or opposition calls for them. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Western Australia faces severe mouse plague threatening agriculture and communities. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. CSIRO Research Officer Steve Henry is warning of mouse plague proportions in Western Australia's grain paddocks, with numbers alarmingly high. Mice are reported in unprecedented numbers in regional WA homes, chewing through plastic containers, milk cartons, and food storage, Geraldton to Esperance. Farmers in WA's Midwest, Wheatbelt, and Goldfields Esperance regions are reporting mouse infestations, with some paddocks seeing up to 8,000 mice per hectare. Steve Henry visited WA in 2022 when mouse numbers were high, but this year's problem is significantly worse. Farmers are encouraged to bait before seeding crops to prevent yield losses, particularly in canola and cereal crops. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports mice numbers in paddocks are over 200 to 300 per hectare as cause for concern, while Newscomau states farmers are finding 4,000 burrows per hectare, implying far higher densities. ABC does not mention the $1 billion grain production threat explicitly, while Newscomau directly cites WA Farmers Chief Executive Trevor Whittington stating this figure. ABC highlights fuel shortages as complicating bait distribution, but Newscomau focuses on federal approval delays for high-strength bait, ZP50, as the primary barrier. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Teenage assault on paramedic after stolen car crash in Melbourne. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A stolen Mazda 3 was involved in a crash with a Volkswagen Jetta at Nicholson St and Victoria Parade, Carlton, just before 6 a.m. on Saturday. 4 teenage males were travelling in the stolen Mazda 3 when it collided with the Volkswagen. 2 boys fled the scene immediately after the crash. A 19-year-old man and a 15-year-old boy were injured in the crash and taken to hospital by ambulance. A 66-year-old man and a 76-year-old woman from Terang were in the Volkswagen and taken to hospital as a precaution. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau states the 19-year-old man assaulted the paramedic, but ABC states the 15-year-old boy assaulted the paramedic. Newscomau does not specify the severity of injuries for the 19-year-old and 15-year-old, while ABC specifies the 19-year-old was seriously injured and the 15-year-old received minor injuries. ABC mentions the Mazda 3 was stolen on March 21, but Newscomau does not specify the year of the theft. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 13-year-old girl charged in Melbourne anti-Semitic crime spree involving car thefts and assaults. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 13-year-old girl from the Bayside area was charged with 52 offences including reckless conduct endangering serious injury, multiple counts of theft of motor vehicle, burglary, handling stolen goods, and threatening physical harm on grounds of a protected attribute, anti-Semitism. The girl allegedly drove a stolen black Hyundai sedan in Hampton, Riponlia, and Caulfield over multiple days last week, shouting anti-Semitic remarks and throwing eggs at pedestrians on the 25th of March. On the 28th of March, the Hyundai allegedly swerved towards Jewish families crossing Hotham Street and Glen Eira Road in Riponlia, narrowly missing them. The stolen Hyundai was taken from a gym in Caulfield. A 45-year-old cyclist in Brighton was injured in a hit-and-run involving a stolen silver SUV on the 25th of March, where the vehicle's passenger door was allegedly opened to hit him before the SUV rammed the bike. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC described the stolen Hyundai as a black Hyundai sedan, but The Age does not specify the color of the Hyundai. The Guardian and ABC mention the stolen SUV was silver, but The Age does not specify the color of the SUV. The Guardian states the e-scooter crash occurred just after midnight on Tuesday, while ABC does not specify the exact time but places it just after midnight on Tuesday morning. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Release and orchestral adaptation of Bluey's fourth album featuring Joff Bush's music. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Joff Bush is the composer of the music for the children's TV show Bluey and its album Up Here. Bluey, Up Here is the fourth album from the Bluey team and the first to feature a chamber orchestra. The album was recorded with over 100 musicians, including the Queensland Symphony Orchestra and Camerata. Bluey's music has reached over 1 billion audio streams globally, with the theme song streamed 126 million times. The show's soundtrack debuted at #1 on the ARIA album charts and won an ARIA award. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions the Sleeper Time track's emotional impact on adults like Elise, while ABC does not provide specific emotional anecdotes about the track. The Guardian states the theme song has been streamed 126 million times, but ABC does not mention this exact number. The Guardian highlights Bush's daughter's reaction to the music and conducting, while ABC does not mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. IOC bans transgender women from Olympic women's events with new genetic testing rules. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The IOC announced new rules banning transgender women and athletes with differences in sex development, DSD, from competing in female Olympic categories starting 2028, citing fairness and safety concerns. The new IOC policy mandates SRY gene testing, via saliva or cheek swab, to determine biological sex for female athletes in Olympic events, Youth Olympics, and qualifiers. Kirsty Coventry was elected IOC president in March 2024 and established a working group to examine female category eligibility, fulfilling a campaign promise to protect the female category. Laurel Hubbard, the first transgender weightlifter to compete in the Olympics, participated in the Tokyo 2020 Games but did not place in her event. The IOC's 2021 framework on fairness, inclusion, and non-discrimination was scrapped in favor of the new policy, reversing its previous stance that transgender women should not be deemed to have an unfair advantage. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Article 1, states the IOC's shift was primarily driven by private pressure from sports governing bodies and the Paris 2024 boxing controversy, while the ABC, Article 2, emphasizes the influence of Donald Trump's anti-trans policies as a key factor in the decision. The Guardian, Article 3, reports that the IOC's new SRY gene testing is described by medical experts as unreliable and reductive, whereas the ABC, Article 2, does not dispute the IOC's claim that the SRY gene is highly accurate evidence of male sex development. The Guardian, Article 1, notes that the IOC's 2021 framework was ripped up entirely with no remaining guidance, while The Guardian, Article 3, states the new policy reversed the 2021 framework but does not imply it was entirely abandoned. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. King Charles III state visit to the US amid Iran war tensions and political backlash. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. King Charles III and Queen Camilla will visit the US as a state visit between April the 27th and 30th, 2025, per both sources. The visit is the first by a British monarch to the US in nearly 20 years, following Queen Elizabeth II's 2007 trip, per both sources. King Charles is expected to address the US Congress during the visit, per both sources. Donald Trump confirmed the visit on Truth Social, stating he greatly respects the king and looks forward to meeting him, per both sources. France, Spain, and Italy have restricted US military airspace or denied landing rights for US warplanes over Iran war operations, per both sources. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Trump called UK aircraft carriers toys and unwanted last week, but The Guardian does not quote this exact criticism. ABC reports Trump's Truth Social post urging the UK to go and get their own oil from the Strait of Hormuz, while The Guardian only mentions contempt without this specific quote. ABC includes the 250th anniversary of American independence as a key event during the visit, but The Guardian does not mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nepal's former PM KP Sharma Oli arrested over alleged role in deadly protest crackdown. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. KP Sharma Oli, 74, and former Home Affairs Minister Ramesh Lekak were arrested in Kathmandu on Saturday, June 2025, over alleged involvement in the deaths of protesters during the Gen Z uprising in September 2024. The arrests followed the swearing-in of new Prime Minister Balendra Shah, Balan, on Friday, June 2025, who campaigned on justice for the killings and anti-corruption reforms. At least 19 protesters were killed when police opened fire during the Gen Z protests in September 2024, with additional deaths, totaling 74 to 76, reported as unrest spread nationwide and government buildings were set ablaze. A leaked government investigation report recommended 10 years in prison for Oli, Lekak, and the former police chief for negligence in the crackdown, stating no effort was made to stop or control the firing and minors died due to their inaction. Police spokesperson OM Odekori confirmed the arrests were made as per the recommendations made by the Investigation Commission. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports 19 protesters were killed during the initial police crackdown, while ABC states 76 people were killed in total during the crackdown and subsequent unrest. The Guardian states the investigation report did not establish that there was an order to shoot, but ABC does not mention this distinction and focuses on negligence. ABC reports Oli's lawyer's name as Tukaram Bhattarai, while The Guardian spells it Tukaram Bhattara. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Sydney gym shooting, 3 men charged in daylight assault with firearms. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 3 men aged 40, 32, and 38 were charged over a shooting outside a gym in Gregory Hills, Sydney on December 5, 2025. A 48-year-old man was allegedly fired upon with 12 rounds outside the gym at Steer Road, Gregory Hills at 8:30 a.m. on December 5, 2025. The alleged shooters escaped in a red Range Rover SUV with cloned number plates, which was later found in bushland near Macquarie Grove Road, Cobbitty. Police recovered clothing, masks, cloned number plates, and 2 pistols from the bushland near the abandoned SUV. The 40-year-old and 32-year-old suspects were arrested on Monday, May 2025, at Parramatta and Burwood respectively, charged with shoot at with intent to murder and acquiring a pistol under a firearms prohibition order. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.